Steadily it rises.
Hey, it's ODB, the Lincoln Addict, back with another podcast episode. Whether you're consuming this via any podcast app, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. If you're on YouTube, please consume this to the end if you can. It greatly helps the channel out. If you're listening via audio and you want to come back and see the visual aspect of it as well, double up. It definitely helps the channel. So without further ado, I want to jump into this episode. I've had this one in my mind for some time, and because I'm getting into topics that aren't as long, potentially, I feel like I can kind of get in a rhythm here and get some episodes out that I've wanted to do for a long time. I've kind of put the research in already, had to do some fine-tuning towards the end to kind of get it here to record. And that's where we're at. So with that being said, we're going to jump into this episode where I'm going to talk about the 1963 Lincoln Continental Lido. I believe is how you pronounce it, Lido. And you'll probably hear me throughout this just refer to it as the Lincoln Lido. There was more than one, but specifically in this episode, as you saw potentially on the thumbnail, I'm going to talk about the 63 because it's kind of a special car. And there were a few things that were a first ever from a 1960s perspective. If you think about the 61 to 69, that's mostly what I focus my time and energy on because I'm a huge fan of those cars. But you may not know there were a few firsts on that Lido that essentially were implemented down the line. Now, I would like to take a moment, as I always do, and give a shout out to some of my key partners. Now, I will say if you're new to this podcast, I typically will have some lead in with various topics. I like to, usually talk about just kind of Lincoln Addict updates, what's going on in the Lincoln world, maybe some Lincolns for sale, Lincolns in TV shows and movies and so on. But for this episode, I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm just going to streamline it to the main topic. There are chapter markers, which is fantastic, but hopefully you'll consume this content all the way through. And again, it greatly helps out my channel. Now back to giving the shout outs. I always talk about Devious Customs, deviouscustoms.com if you want to do air suspension on your car, but he also has other products that potentially would assist you in your journey, whether you're looking to upgrade the window switches or other things, even like windshields, believe it or not. Colorado Custom Wheels, I have those wheels on my 64 Lincoln. The Lincoln Replica wheels, I also have Colorado Custom wheels on other vehicles. So to me, best in the business. Shout out to Michael and team. Hit up Colorado Custom with no S.com. Steel rubber. I'm often asked, hey, what's the best method for replacing the weather stripping on my 60s Lincoln? No other than Steel, STEELE, rubber.com. We've had the kinfolk on in the past, and he has described why their products are superior. And then let's not forget Nick and the entire team, casted characters at Griot's Garage. Griot's is the best in the business. Huge shout out to Griot's Garage. Thank you for the continued support. Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see I'm going to bounce up into the corner, hopefully, or one of the corners of this video. I love being able to do that. That way you get the kind of the full immersive experience of what I'm covering, but at the same time, then you're able to still see me, and it's not just, a presentation. The 63 Lincoln Lido is the main topic, as I mentioned, and on the screen, you will see, unless you're listening via audio, so I won't say that anymore, you will see on the screen the 7th Annual International Automobile Show, which was April of 1963. That's technically what this car was built for. You'll also see an image here, which is a very rare image. I think if you stick with me, you're gonna your interest will be piqued in this car. There's something I need your help with, though, in my opinion, because there's something that just doesn't click in my mind, and I'll talk to you guys about that a little bit later. So if you have any intel, maybe you knew someone that owned this car, then feel free to let me know in the comments. But when we get to the color of this car, I want to try to pick your brain, if you will. The chapter markers, I'm going to do this. Obviously, we started the video, but I'm going to do the Lido introduction. 63 Lincoln Lido images and specs. So just kind of talking a little bit about some of the specifications of this special car. And we'll look at some of the images, of course. That's going to really be the bread and butter. There is a timeline that I put together that I want to share. I reinforce the ownership and history of this one-of-one 63 Lido. We'll look at a few additional images, and then I want to kind of close it out with, there's a gentleman years ago that built a 63 Lido replica. It's kind of referred to as a facsimile, which is an old school term. Some of us, the faxes, if you will, is the short version of that. Such an old school term by 2025 standards, but certainly a 63 Lincoln Lido replica. I do also want to give a huge shout out to the Lincoln and Continental Owners Club, often referred to as the Lincoln Continental Owners Club, which they went by for so many years, known as, for short, LCOC for short. But I want to give a huge shout out to the LCOC. You can visit their website or just Google LCOC. These issues here, which I'll reference, not so much this one, this is a special show car for 65, but these issues, this information is really where a lot of this information came from, which is fantastic because so many of you may know that it is hard to find information on these vehicles. And that's why many of you have chimed in on my social media as well as my YouTube content. And you said, hey, I love what you're doing. Some of the great folks I met at the LCOC event in June of 2025, they said, hey, it's awesome what you're doing, Jay, because there's kind of nobody else doing this. And I got to give credit to a lot of folks, including the folks that wrote these articles, because there are some folks, some that are no longer with us, unfortunately, that these guys and these ladies knew every aspect of these different stories and the history of the Lincoln Motor Company in so much of that storied era coming out of the late 50s into the 60s and so on. So again, I always give credit where credit's due. And certainly I'm the guy that's got the easy job that kind of comes in, floats in 2020s and says, hey, I love this stuff. Let me do some deep dives. Let me talk about the things that people have already written about. So my dad used to always say, you can learn what it took someone a lifetime to learn just by picking up a book. So in this case, these books are magazines, but I'll take them. Okay, so the introduction, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. However, if you Google Lincoln Lido, you're more than likely going to land on, I've got two resources here. And you're going to see in 1950 and 1951, there was an introduction of a mid-year during 50 into 51, and it was discontinued after the 51 model year, and that was a Lido model. And basically, Lido, we don't know exactly where that name came from. I'll debunk one thing that I've kind of hinted in social media a little bit later, but that term really referred to like Lincoln kind of putting a little extra emphasis onto a car, making it basically like a show car. There's an article on Mac's Motor City Garage, as well as a link here, which I'll briefly jump over to. And again, if you just do some basic research on the internet, you will find a few articles. This one's en.wheelswithaz.me. So obviously looks like it's something from another country potentially, but it talks about the Lido's distinctive look, inside the lap of luxury and things like that. So what I want to do is I want to just show you this really quick. Now, I am going to have some really good photos, but I want to highlight a few things. This is the May-June 2000 issue of Continental Comments, number 234. Just in case anybody was looking to ever acquire some of these, you could sometimes find them. But in this issue, there is an article titled The Lincoln Lido and the Lido Replica. And that reinforces a few key things that I just want to kind of bullet point here audibly. They do tie back to the March-April of 97. So issue 215, they do mention this one. So this is where I pulled a lot of good information, both of these issues rather. And they talk about the gentleman that acquired this car from the Ford Motor Company was William H. McKenzie. So William Hector McKenzie. So we'll talk a little bit more about him. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on some of these details because I know for me, it's the car, right? It's the uniqueness. So we're going to get to that. Please just bear with me a minute. Now, he was, my understanding, a New York state legislator. He was the father-in-law of Pat Ford. And Pat Ford was an LCOC member in San Diego. And that was kind of a cool tie-in. Now, the article covers Chuck Good. So I'm going to show you this. There's an article in the May-June 2000 issue. And on the back, and it is where I'm going to ask for some of you guys' help a little bit later. On the back here is Chuck Goods. Now, he's since sold this car. It's a 63, and we'll see more photos of it, of his replica Lido. So that is covered in this issue. as I reinforced. That car, I'll talk a little bit more about, and I'll show you some images of it. It was sold back at, I think, the Barrett-Jackson of 99 in Scottsdale. The Lido that we're going to talk about today that I hinted on that first slide basically was the 8th car off the production line for the 63 model year. So we're talking August of 62 when that production ramped up. That was that car. And my understanding from all of the research is it was finished in Riviera turquoise metallic with a turquoise cloud pattern cloth. Now, we don't have any photos of that car in its original existence. The Lido is what we're talking about, the 63 Lido, but I've got some photos that you may have never seen, and we'll cover those, what it was kind of morphed into, if you will. Now, this car, I mentioned this at the beginning, the 63 Lido, it was customized and built, if you will, in-house by the Lincoln Motor Company folks. And they quote in here and say, at this point, the car was selected by the Lincoln Advanced Styling Studio for transformation into what they refer to as a glamour model. Now, in the March-April 97, so again, just for those scoring at home, this issue here that I'm showing on YouTube, the 63 Lincoln Lido dash the Cautious Show Car by Jim Farrell. Now, Jim Farrell or Farrell, I don't know the exact pronunciation. You'll see this name pop up in a lot of different articles because this guy knew his stuff, so tip of the cap to him. There's also an article in there, How I Almost Owned the 63 Lincoln Lido by Pat Ford. So you heard his name a moment ago. He provides a lot of the intel on these stories. And something I've always wanted to kind of reinforce, and I've jokingly said this a couple of times in social media, not really knowing 100%, was it maybe this or was it maybe that? Some folks seem to think that the word Lido, L-I-D-O, could be named after Lee Iacocca. That was his given name, believe it or not. And if you look back and you go, wow, like he did obviously moved into the automotive industry at a very young age. And, you know, I've often thought like, wow, was it his point of the strings that, you know, made these cars named Lido? And unfortunately, that from everything that we know, that was not the case. And that's what's reinforced in some of these articles. They do go on to say Henry Ford II was enamored with Italy during that time. And even though he was enamored with Italy, the Lido name was in fact carried over from the 50 and 51 models, like, you know, in that era. So, you know, you could argue and say, well, yeah, maybe the family used that name back then. We don't really know. If you happen to know, please chime in. The 50 and 51 Cosmopolitan Capri Coupes were the first production Lincolns with the vinyl tops. So that'll tie in on this car as well. So I know I'm kind of jumping around here just for a moment, but this is kind of the introduction of what a Lido is and a little bit of the overview according to these articles. Now, the 63 Lido started out as a regular production Lincoln right off the assembly line. I reinforced that. And believe it or not, a guy by the name of Jim Powers and his crew are rightfully considered as the most responsible for the 63 Lido. Again, it was built in-house. Okay, I am going to show this slide here. So the ownership and history. So Lincoln Motor Company builds the car. They display it April 13th to the 21st of 1963. At the New York International Auto Show, so for short, NIISAS, excuse me. Yes, so if you think about it, the 63 model, like I always talk about, you know, mid to late summer, those of the previous year, they start to ramp up that production. So August of 62, they start to build the 63 model, and being that this was the 8th off the line, we can almost nail down the exact date that it was plucked off of the assembly line. Now, Bill McKenzie's son, who goes by Bill Jr. in all of this literature, told his father about the car and that he should find a way to buy it. A price was negotiated via a longtime friend, Leonard Jones, who was the Lincoln dealer in Wellsville. The press covered the car's delivery. So believe it or not, even though this is, you know, considered a show car, you know, we often hear about concept cars being crushed. That did not happen. And a lot of folks seem to think that because this vehicle was done in-house, it didn't have the, you know, situation that we've seen even like in 2000 when Lincoln did the Continental and they did this concept car, like it didn't run and, you know, nothing worked on it. I mean, it was like basically a pusher of a car. That was not the case here. I mean, this was a production car that they plucked. And in these stories, it talks about that at the end, after all of this, they took it back to, one of the key guys, and he plugged everything back in. He made sure everything worked. So by all accounts, like, this was a full-blown regular car, and that's why I believe it was sold. So they negotiated at a price via the long-term friend Leonard Jones, and the car was sold to the gentleman, and Bill McKenzie took ownership of it. Now, the press covered this, and Pat Ford, who wrote this article, was able to, quote, memorialize the event with photos of the Lido as new. It only had 300 miles on the odometer. Now, here's the crazy thing. In some of the articles, we don't know exactly how much it sold for, but people said that they think it could have been upwards of $25,000 because it was this one-off special car. Now, do I believe it was $25K? I mean, if the car was new, $5,000 to $6,000, that's a lot, back in 63. Maybe it was 10 grand, maybe it was 15. I mean, we really don't know, but I would say at the time, it probably was one of the most expensive Lincolns ever sold. If you just think about the dynamics of it being that it was a one-off car and they decided to sell it, and we've heard that it could have sold upwards of 25,000. I doubt it went that high, but who knows? 300 miles on the odometer. Now, the gentleman, Bill, he drives the car and he takes very good care of it. Like, if there's anybody that rides in the car, they basically have to take off their shoes. That's how OCD this guy was. He puts about 1,100 miles on it, and he sells it to John Buster Bradley in 1967. From 67, give or take 4 years, it gets about 800 miles put on it, in addition to the original 300. Bill sold the Lido in 85. The buyer was another guy by the name of Bill. This was Bill Donovan, a local auto parts dealer, had it tucked away in his garage with 30,000 miles at that point. So from 67 to 85, it was driven, and it was 30K, if you will. In the additional images section of this presentation, I'll kind of show some of those photos from 2014, but we'll get to that. Okay, so this is the bread and butter. This is what we all want to get to. Let's look at the photos. Now, I shared this photo on the first slide kind of as a teaser. This is one of the only photos that I can find, even from the Henry Ford Museum, that has a ton of stuff. This photo was taken, we could see at the numbers, how they would put those underneath the car for documentation purposes, on October 11th of 62. And this car was reportedly finished, like, by the time they took these photos. Like, this car's done. So that reinforces it was plucked, I would say, the first or second week of August of 62. And literally, it was built within a couple of months, 2 months, right? The big thing was there was not heavy body modifications done, and that was kind of stated in some of these articles. So it made it a little bit easier. It was mostly refinements to the interior. They added the vinyl to the roof, so more on that. The wheel covers, you could see, for anybody that's somebody that can hone in pretty quickly and see the changes. Obviously, those are what becomes of the 64, 65 wheel covers, aka hubcaps. Now, this is another image that you may have seen. There's a now defunct website that unfortunately is no longer in existence, but this is a black and white. And unfortunately, most of the photos that I have are black and white, but that leads to one of the mysteries that I'm trying to unsolve on this car that we'll get to. Okay, now the LCOC Continental comments really came in huge here, because I'm telling you what, I searched and searched and searched for many years to try to find photos, and I can't hardly find anything on this car. This is a publicity shot. At the time, Mr. McKenzie, rest in peace, bought the car. This is via the Continental Comments, March, April 97 by Pat Ford. Now, William H. McKenzie in Wellsville, New York, he's in front of the Lido here. To the left is Leonard B. Jones, the local Lincoln Mercury dealer, and to his right is a Ford representative. Now, every time I look at this photo now, I keep thinking Jack Ruby in the middle, and I can't unsee that for some reason. But with all due respect there, Leonard B. Jones, it's very cool to uncover this history. And again, I couldn't have done it without Continental Comments, because there's just nothing out there that I can find. Now, in this same article, there's a few photos, so I'm very thankful. We can see this front kind of three-quarter side shot, if you will, of the car. The gentleman is in the car. And, of course, I've got two little creases in the paper. That's what came up in this scan. But you can see, basically, from what we can tell, it does look like a 63 for the most part from the outside, other than the wheel covers. Of course, a 15-inch. Now, my assumption, and I talked to my buddy Tony, my assumption is it's a 15-inch wheel cover. I don't know. We can look at one other spot to see if it is mentioned. Tony was like, well, they probably added the disc brakes to the front of it, and we'll have to look and see if it's on one of the other slides where I uploaded some of the specs, but we shall get there. It is also worth noting that if you look on the front license plate, it does say B. I think it's a BM. So not sure what that would be referred to. Maybe it was just something to do with the normal specialty plate that they would have had for, a non on the road car. I don't know. If you happen to know, please chime in. It does look like from the back it's a BM as well. Maybe it's an 8M. We can see here again the gentleman with the car, and it's hard to tell if the wheel cover. My understanding is these were made for this car, and we know that this is probably what led to the 64, 65, but it does look a little bit different in the middle, but it is kind of hard to tell. We can see all of the other styling cues because, again, remember the 63, the normal stuff that would have been implemented on that year with the raised decklet and all of that, all of this is in play on this vehicle. This is a great photo here. It shows the gentleman, you talk about old school, all dressed up there. This would have been presumably in April or May of 63. And you could see there a little bit of the interior, which we'll get to. Rest in peace to, again, Mr. William McKenzie. This is with his Lincoln Lido when Ford, believe it or not, delivered this car to his home. Now, that's what I call service. Now, because of the Continental Comments May, June 2000, we do have this article where it talks about some of the specs and the exterior. Here's where I need your help. The exterior says hand-rubbed acrylic lacquer, finish in exclusive color, Persian sand pearlescent. Okay. What I don't understand is this. I asked my wife and I said, this is the replica car that Chuck Good built. Okay. Maybe somebody that knew Chuck Good or somebody that saw this car. This car went overseas many years ago. When we get to some more of these, and we're looking at the specs now, the car with like Persian sand, I think of like a brownish sand color. But when you look at photos of this replica, it more has a lilac or violet color. Okay. Now, I asked my wife and she goes, well, it's probably these photos, the way they were taken. She goes, it's probably the same color. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that. But I'd like for you guys to chime in. Like, am I off? Like, when you see the rest of these photos, like, clearly they have to be two different colors. So I wonder why Chuck Good would have painted it this color if the car was like a brownish color. That's what I'm trying to get to. So let's keep on keeping on. Okay, so in this article, it talks about the color, as I mentioned, exclusive handcrafted wheel covers, 9 chromed vertical louvers, which I do want to point this out. It's very hard to see in this image here, but there are some louvers that are added here, and apparently they're nothing more than cosmetic. Okay, and again, you can barely see them here. We'll get a better image of this a little bit later. Some sort of weird styling thing they came up with, but apparently they did nothing other than they were just louvers. You can kind of see them here and here. We're going to talk about the seats here in a few moments, and the big thing is the individual adjustable front seats, which are often referred to now as just bucket seats. There's going to be some big news on that in this video here that I'll kind of reinforce to you. And then, okay, here you go. Yeah, so I think I did read this, but it didn't click. They did have 15-inch wheels on this 63. So for those scoring at home, remember, we don't get 15-inch wheels until 64, but of course we get discs in 65. Typically you're going to have a 15-inch wheel, even like if you have an old school car now and you want to put disc brakes on it, you typically have to jump up to a 15. Regardless, that one of the reasons why, and let's just make it clear, that Ford and Lincoln decided to put together this kind of show cars, they were also testing the market to go, hey, what if we did this? And you're going to see a few of these things actually literally ended up on the next model year, including those wheel covers. Okay, so the timeline. In 62, at some point, there's a decision to create the 63 Lido. The car was pulled from the assembly line. I have a typo there. My assumption, literally, we can nail this down to the first or second week of August. If we look at the production, we have the production run dates for 64. It was like early that first or second week in August of the previous year. That's when they ramp up production. So we know this car ends with a 0008 So we know it's the 8th car off the production line. Now, I do not have an image of the VIN plate or the door plate, if you will, but we know that it was 08. So it was the 8th off the production line. We go back to like first day, second day, if you will. That's going to be the first or second, third week, if you will, at the latest, I would say, of August of 62. The car was built, again, August to October. For the New York International Auto Show. And the Ford Lincoln motor image that I showed was October 11th of 62. Now, I want to thank Dan. His name is in the upper right corner, Dan of the Lincoln Forum, which, by the way, for those that don't know, the Lincoln Forum has been back up. So I highly suggest it's free. Go out there, support the forum, and post away and research away. Now, he posted these photos in September 2014, okay? Help me understand what we've read so far on the color that they painted this car, this show car, right? This Lido was like that Persian sand color. That's what it looks like to me. I don't understand how these other images you're going to see towards the end for the replica, why it was done in the purplish color. And my wife was like, well, it's probably the same color. And I was like, I'm not buying that. But my mind can't kind of wrap my mind around it yet. And so yeah, I need your help there. Now, I did chime in to ask Dan. My understanding was this is when the car was for sale, I'm assuming in September 2014. We know that there was only one made other than the replica. So these are very, very rare images. And from looking at the black and white images, although we can't necessarily tell what color it was, this presumably is the color because it matches what was in the description of the vehicle, especially by that gentleman by the name of Ford from San Diego. Now, a few things that I want to point out here, and this is also in the literature, okay, from these articles. Number one, the vinyl roof. There had not been a vinyl roof other than the town car of the 50s since the 50-51 Lido. So that vinyl roof, we know it was the first one of the 60s until 65. So that was a thing. Boom, check it off. That shows up, that appears, if you will, 2 years later in the 65 model year. The next thing is we've got the font. So we know 61, 62, 63, the font is that iconic, what I call Continental script. 64, it's not my favorite. I don't necessarily mind it, but what we can see on this Lido is that it does carry over from the 63 Lido to the 64 model year. We can also see, oh, by the way, as I mentioned, the wheel covers. Again, looking at these, it is kind of hard to tell. They're probably a little bit different if these were kind of one-offs or they were kind of nailing down the tooling, if you will. But certainly, I mean, that has the look and feel of it. It looks like it protrudes a little bit differently. I'd have to grab one over here, but I think like just taking a quick gander over on my hubcap wall, the official hubcaps, they're a little bit more concaved in the middle. So I would say that those are probably 4 more kind of one-offs. Not one-off, there's 4 of them, but you know what I mean. We can also see the louvers that never made it in terms of the 61 to 69. And those were some of the big things that we can see here. We can see Lido was recessed or inset there, which is kind of cool. We know for the most part that never made it to a particular model, but it is cool that we have this close-up photo. This is the big thing that I want you guys to know. Not only does the vinyl carry over and the badging on the rear, but the biggest thing is the interior. And to me, this is super cool. I wanted to share these photos for a while, but I told myself, hey, let's just get an episode out first. And the biggest thing that we get from this Lido, in my opinion, although it's very rare, is the bucket seats, which are also known as the individually adjustable contour seats. Okay. Now, a friend of mine, Josh, that's had a couple Lincolns that sold them to people in Dubai, I believe, the Middle East. He has went back and forth a couple times in comments over the years, he and I texting or different and whatnot. And he said, his recollection was that there were some 63 models that were able to get bucket seats. We don't know that to be true. But what I can tell you is that this was the first 60s Lincoln, okay? So we're talking August to October of 62 that basically gets the bucket seats, okay? I haven't found any proof of somebody like late in that production model, in a 63 model, getting the individual adjustable seats. Maybe there's one out there, but this is the first. And if you take a look at the door panels, with the inset wood trim, totally different. That's where the big styling changes were on this vehicle, and they were on the interior. And I got to thank Dan for these images. Even looking back here, It's some of these little things. I mean, there's definitely differences. The few things that stand out to me are the door panels, the seats, and then, by the way, if you look at where your back would be, we see that biscuit pattern, which is beloved. I love it. But you notice that where, your buttocks would be, that is not the biscuit. So, we get the biscuit, which, if keep me honest, I believe kind of carried over from the 56 and 57 Continental. So, there you have it. You can kind of see over the course of time how things are kind of shared and borrowed and pulled forward from a design aesthetic. From what I can tell, the center console does look a little bit different. I mean, obviously there's going to be some tweaks probably from this going forward. I mean, the bucket seats themselves look pretty much spot on, but the door panels are definitely different. To me, this is super cool to see. Here is another image. And it is hard to tell if there's anything else. I mean, we see the standard dash for the most part. We know in the 63 model year, you get more of that one-piece dash. And this car, to me, it's super cool. I wish I could get my hands on it. The center console looks pretty cool to me. Again, this would be a one-of-one car with definitely some rich history. And then here's another photo of the back seats and kind of seeing there. What do you think of this car? Do you like it? Do you think it looks ugly? Okay, Lincoln Lido Replica. So this article is the May-June 2000, the Lincoln Lido and Lido Replica. The cool thing about this article by Chuck Good, who owned and built this car, he talks about his decision to build a replica of the Lido, and he talks about ultimately selling it. You can see a few things to me that stick out is one, again, on the back of this magazine, and I know I'm kind of in one of the corners right now, it looks more of like a purple color. And I read this twice, and unless I'm missing it, like, I just don't get the connection between the two colors. Like, did he just paint it this way just to be different? Or was that other car painted that color at some point? Like, I'm not seeing the correlation. Now, you could say, hey, well, Jason, you said the photos that Dan posted in the Lincoln Forum are from September 2014. Maybe it changed. Certainly, maybe it did. But if we go back here, and we look at this article from 2000, it says it was hand rub acrylic lacquer finish in exclusive color Persian sand pearlescent, which my wife was like, well, that sounds kind of like the purplish color. I don't know. Again, I'm looking for your help. This is the image from the back of that issue. And I guess you could argue, like, yeah, well, maybe when the sun's hitting or whatever, but this right next to the sand color just looks different to me. So if anybody was like families with Chuck, hopefully Chuck's still with us, or anybody that got a chance to see these cars, or maybe the owner. I believe this one went to Denmark over the course of time. I've seen photos of this car pop up on social media, and I immediately knew what car it was because of the wheel covers, because of the color of the car. Here's a rear shot again from that rear cover of the Continental comments. You can see the license plate, obviously different because it's a different country. This is the image that has popped up on social media that someone took. Just a random photo, and immediately knew that car. I was like, oh, that's the Lido Replica. Pretty cool stuff there. Okay, I'm not going to go through the appendix. I am going to mention, if you're not following us in social media, please do that. This is, when I was Googling, it's funny, a lot of times if I'm looking for something, I'll often land on my own posts, which makes me feel good because it kind of reinforces not a lot of people are going out there, at least in a social media world. All credit due to the folks that compiled this information all those years ago. I mean, God, we're in 2025, 1990. I hate to say it, 35 years ago. Crazy, right? But you could see here, when I posted this image, this was Chuck Good's 63 Lincoln pseudo Lido. So pseudo meaning, a facsimile, look-alike, if you will, which at one point, at the time of this print, was owned by the gentleman's name there in Denmark. So you could see that. And then, of course, there's the rear three-quarter shot. So with that being said, I hope you don't get bored by some of the stuff. I love researching stuff. I hated it in school. I love doing it now. I guess when you're doing things that you appreciate or that your hobby, you just go, man, I love it. But I want to thank you for all the support. I'd love for you to chime in. Have you ever seen this car? Do you have photos? Can you email me, Lincoln Addict Podcast at gmail.com? Were you related to any of the folks in New York or Chuck Good or some of these folks that I mentioned? Do you have some old photos? I would love to see this stuff because, again, don't just take my word for it. Try researching something, or a car or a car show from 1963. I can't find any photos of Lincolns at that 63 New York Auto Show. They just don't exist online. I've looked in a lot of places. Now, I found a few other obscure kind of automakers and things like that, but certainly nothing from a Lincoln perspective. So just know in social media, when you guys see me posting stuff, if you knew how much time I had invested in just searching, researching, going down just crazy bunny trails and rabbit holes, you'd be like, dude, get a life. And that's the way I feel sometimes. But in all seriousness, I do enjoy doing it. So if you want to leave a tip here, or if you want to go to my website that's linked in the description and purchase a sticker, please feel free to do that. I want to thank Colorado Custom Wheels. Love those wheels. I want to thank Devious Customs. Steel rubber, the only product I would use on my car to seal it. You want to be sealed with steel. And then, of course, Griot's Garage, great people, best detailing products in the industry. I would put money on that if I was a betting man. With that being said, thank you so much for the support. I'd love for you to chime in. If you've got intel on the stuff that I cover, email me. I may not get right back to you, but I do try to get back to everybody. Lincoln Addict Podcast at gmail.com. ODB, I am the Lincoln Addict. Thank you so much. And to my friend John Sweet, I know you're going through a lot right now. You got this, buddy. You're a good dude. I'm so glad I met you. You've been around Lincoln's a long time, and you got many more years to come. So stay on the rise, everyone. Michelle, much love and respect, y'all. ODB, we at ya. Peace.
Welcome to L.A. where the players play, and we ride on the things like every day.